Welcome to the Ignite You podcast.
We're two bros journey into all things spirituality and human transformation.
Let's get it.
Vita ativo, vita ativo, vita ativo, vita ativo.
All right, on that note, welcome to the Ignite You podcast, people. Today, we're talking about all things sex, love, Tantra, and BDSM. You know who it is. It's Ryan Miller here.
And I'm Cam McDougall.
Let's dive in.
So, disclaimer,
Yeah, of course.
we're in a playful mood.
It's obvious.
This is going to be a playful and serious topic. We will dip in and out as we normally do.
Yes.
But full disclaimer, we're hopped up on cappuccinos.
We're hopped up on matcha cacao. So what this is it's a beverage, a tonic that we love to drink, with the main ingredients being cacao and matcha and some other things. So that being said, we call it matcha cacao.
But I made it, so it's cappuccino.
So today, we're not talking about that. That's part of the disclaimer. Also, we are not experts in these fields, which you all probably...
Right.
That's the real disclaimer.
Oh, they're right. We had a serious one.
Yes, we're not experts in these fields at all. We are humans who have had experiences. This is kind of in the way. We've had experiences in these worlds, and we continue to explore them. We are curious about these worlds, and we have a lot that has come up around these areas. So we thought it'd be helpful to talk about these topics, but in no way, shape, or form are we experts.
It's all our experience. This isn't books. Well, actually, we might reference some books that have helped us along the way, but this is all from our perspective. So if you are an expert in any of these areas and you're listening to this, correct us if we're wrong, because we are students to this work. We are open to the opinions from experts. We will be bringing experts onto the show very soon. But let us know, because we want to learn.
Call us out.
Call us out.
We love a good call out.
We do love a good call out. As much as we love a good crop top.
Obviously, we love crop tops.
Yep.
Okay. Just want to make sure they can see.
So I guess when we think about getting into, sexuality, love, Tantra, BDSM, all these topics, it's like we got to start at the root.
The root chakra.
We got to start at the root chakra, which is actually kind of accurate in a way.
Yeah.
But let's riff on the topic of toxic masculinity, because I know personally that I used to be a fuckboy. Like, I was not a conscious human when it came to sex. Yes, I was a serial monogamous, and yes, I had morals, and I think I treated most of my partners well. At the same time, I was a bit of a slut. And did not really understand how sacred sexuality was. And I correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that you followed a similar path that way.
You're right. Yeah, okay. You were correct. Cam and I were talking about this actually, because this is a huge subject and huge discussion. But to just go into it, the experiences I've had to what Cam is saying are very similar. Like the way that I engaged sex and the way that I approached hooking up with women. At a young age, it was a numbers game. I don't know if you had this thing going on as well, but in school, like in upbringing, it's like numbers. Totally. It's a numbers game, actually. You would meet up with your friends and you'd be like, this is where I'm at. Yeah. This is my number.
Yeah.
And don't know if this applies to all genders and this is how it goes, but I know for boys, majority in my experience in the collective I had was we'd show up, we'd share, and that would be a thing. And you'd get judged based on your number of hookups that you've had. Had nothing to do with the quality of connection. Had nothing to do with who that person was. Almost no humanity in it.
None.
Just this number.
Yeah.
I don't know, was that something you had as well?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. It was all about status.
Yeah.
It was like for me growing up, the moment that, I lost my virginity, I think I was 14, 15, something like that. The moment I lost my virginity, it was kind of like, all right, now I'm in the game.
Yeah.
And now every time my friends are like, yo, what happened with that girl? Yo, what happened with that girl? And it would just become this thing where it was like, oh shit, I got to tell my boys tomorrow that I hooked up with this girl.
Mm-hmm.
And so that became this pressure.
Yeah.
And that became the whole driving force around sex and connection was, it was pleasurable, but at the same time, it was like, let's just get super fucked up and, hopefully hook up, and then I can brag about it with my boys.
Yeah, it's actually that was the most important part, was like the after
for sure
effect. It wasn't even like doing it with a certain person. It was like, oh, I get to say that I did that with that person.
Half the time you were both so wasted that you didn't even know what the hell you were doing, and it was more about the that happened.
Yeah, and I told you this, but I was actually 11 the first time I received oral sex.
Yeah.
And at that point I couldn't even ejaculate. Like, boys at that time, or at least my experience was, I couldn't even produce sperm by the time that I had my first sexual encounter.
Yeah.
And one reason being also because I had an older brother, so he was a few years ahead of me in that regard. So I would kind of see that and then have expectations to also be there. Mm-hmm. So it's very interesting how these things come to surface, and then I have shame around that, and these other things come up naturally. I'm like, I was 11, and then similar to you, I was like, okay, I did that. That means I need to continue this thing. Mm-hmm. And so I need to keep this going and make sure I'm the person that's like, out of my friend group, I'm the one that's hooking up or like leading the way in that.
Yeah.
It's like this weird status game that goes on in that world.
Very weird. And it becomes the driving force for all conversation. Like, it becomes it literally becomes the only question that boys kind of ask each other. Like, if a guy was connecting with a woman back in the day, or like, your teens at this point, but it'd be like, what happened? Like, how far did you go?
Yeah.
And it became this whole dialogue around, that was the only thing that would be talked about. And if you hooked up, it was like high fives. And if not, it's like, you're weak, you're soft. Like, why couldn't you close that deal? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And I heard actually the other day, Chris D'Elia is a comedian. He was saying how men do everything for sex all the time, always. Like, anything you do is to get into a vagina. Like, that was his wording, and I was like, oh, that's pretty intense. But in a sense, definitely at that age, like, that was the focus. That was what I was doing anything for. Like, that's why I started working out in a sense. That's why I started doing anything, dressing a certain way. It was like, okay, will this kind of plant me somewhere or leverage me somewhere so I can be perceived as X to then receive a to have sex.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, man, it definitely came from a disturbing place, and it came from a place of expectation, and like, didn't feel good. And that's what also didn't allow me to have friends that were women at that age. I shared this before in the Divine Feminine podcast episode, and it was a challenge to actually get to the place to have female friends, because I had so many programs in my head of like, this is what men and women do. I was so deeply programmed with, if I talk to a woman, that intention is there. She thinks it is, I think it is. So I can't have female friends. I probably wasn't 20 until I had like my first encounter with a woman where I was like, oh, okay, we can be friends. And it like felt good, and I could explore that. But yeah, it wasn't something that came naturally. There's so many programs around it for me.
Yeah, and then you bring in sports, you bring in porn, you bring in this, the whole world of these storylines that we attach ourselves to. And when we grew up in different times where I think porn was a lot more readily available for you as a teen, but for me it was like, I was watching the scrambled version of the higher channels, listening to the sounds to like rub one out when I was a kid, because I was getting everything that I could. So I didn't have that same experience that kids have now, or teens have now. On the flip side, though, my friends and I would get together and we would watch shows like Girls Gone Wild and Bang Bus and all these awful kind of misogynistic shows that were guys getting women to do these crazy things. And we slowly started thinking that was how it went down. Like, when you're that young and you're so open and you have no idea about any of really anything that's going on around you, you're just like, oh, these guys look kind of cool. Those girls are really hot. They're doing this thing. That must be how it goes. And oh, wow, these girls look like they're enjoying it. Cool. When really it's like, thinking back, I'm like, a lot of those women probably have serious sexual trauma now because of those experiences. But it programs us.
Yeah, it's true.
It really does.
I probably didn't go down on a woman. I was just thinking about this, on a girl, until I was like 17 because I was like, I didn't see it in the porn that I watched. I didn't see oral sex from men to women.
Yeah.
Just like men get head and then have sex. That's what happens.
Fuck, that's boring.
Isn't that crazy?
So boring.
So boring, man. God, like that's like one of my most pleasurable parts now. Like I fucking love exploring the yoni. But it was insane to think about. Like that was my experience, was like, sex is this. This is how it looks. This is what I do.
Yeah.
This is what it is. Every time it was like this like formula. And it didn't involve me going down on women, which is this weird, and then that was accepted upon for the women around me. It was like, yeah, that's what it is. Man.
Very interesting. And you know, I really think that for me at least, a lot of it came down to like deep rooted insecurity.
Yeah.
Because I started gauging like how handsome I was, or how successful I was, or how cool I was, or how, you know, the status I held by the amount of women that I slept with, and at that point, you know, what I quote unquote thought was an attractive woman or not. And it was this suppression of so much insecurity, of feeling so out of place and so not seen, so not heard. And at the same time, you know, this whole numbers game pulled me away of the fact that like I was terrified that I like wasn't going to perform well, or that, you know, I would come too quick, or that like I'd be too drunk and wouldn't get it up. And so there was all this pressure and all this shame that just drove this kind of toxic way of being that would just cause me to like suppress and suppress and suppress and suppress. And that caused a lot of challenges for me in my sexual life, which I think I've done a pretty good job now working through them, and we'll get into that in a bit. But for years, man, like I'm 36 now, and for a very long time, that programmed me and dictated how I thought about my partners, how I navigated being single. Like it was so wild.
Yeah, the performance thing is big, and yeah, I can also speak to that because I have similar experiences with that. I think a lot of people do, but yeah, the I would say traumatization, that could be a heavy word, but these experiences of, if I didn't perform, what did that mean about me being a man?
Yeah,
could I be a man and not perform? Is that possible? And so yeah, it would be that, like this, you know, whiskey dick, right? That's the classic, like if you drink too much. And so that actually went into one of my later relationships, when I was like, oh, I love this person. I want to explore a relationship with this person. But then I stopped wanting to have sex because I felt if I couldn't perform, what did that mean about my manhood? What did that, and I didn't know myself to be somebody that didn't perform, but like from happening one time, from one experience, like blocked me. I was like, oh, that means if that happened once, that can happen again. And what happened? What does that mean about me? And so it blocked me from having this intimate. It blocked sexual connection, which then blocked almost all intimacy because I blocked it. Not to say you can't have intimacy without sex, but when I blocked the sex, I was like, oh, that means we can't be intimate. And then just so much guilt and shame, and then like, both sides of the relationship. But yeah, it fed into each other just from, I could have fucking voiced that, right? And to look back, you can learn from it, but to be in that place was so intense and so rough, and I would output it on other things and make me go to the gym more and be like, I need to get bigger because then I'll feel good.
Totally.
It's these traumatizations around the experience, but man, it's a big one.
It really is. It really is. And I think a lot of men will relate to that. I know for me, you know, performance anxiety was always a thing, especially and you know, I'd have relationships with some women and some partners that, you know, I couldn't have sex if I wasn't drunk. Like it was like it was just, we'd always have a couple drinks or have a bit of wine, or, you know, there was always that involved because otherwise it was like my anxiety was so high about the whole situation that it wouldn't go the way that I wanted to, and I didn't know how to connect, and so we just suppress more, and we become more insecure, and we become more shameful, and it just becomes this spiral. And I think that this is why we wanted to talk about this on this podcast. This is why we wanted to bring these topics up, is that there's so much liberation in sex, and we're going to get into how we found that. But there's so much liberation for insecurity, for shame, for guilt, for disgust, for all these things that we carry in sex and really in, you know, diving into the sexual traumas we hold, the sexual insecurities we hold, and ultimately, you know, the full expression that we always talk about on this podcast.
Yeah. So for you, when did you start going into, let's just call it conscious sex for the first layer? When did you start going down that path of either like conscious intimacy or conscious sex? Like, when did this start coming through for you?
Yeah, great question. And it all started for me, honestly, when I quit watching porn. That was the pivotal moment for me, because we talk about insecurity and we talk about the shame that we carry. And for me, you know, I based my sexual experiences off of what I saw in porn.
Yeah.
Right? So I would see this rock hard dude just like pleasuring this woman beyond expression until she exploded, and I would be like, wow, that's what my sex is supposed to look like. And I would also be like, and that's what my partner's supposed to look like. And if I had a partner that didn't fit that build, I would lose interest and I would not want to have sex, and then I would go and I would search for another partner. And when I stopped watching porn, it opened up a whole new realm of intimacy with my partner and exploring my partner and loving on my partner. Now, I wasn't practicing any breathing techniques or, you know, doing anything more advanced when it comes to more of the tantric practices, but it brought a level of presence to my sexual experience. Like, I was still drinking, still doing that stuff, but I still was like able to actually see my partner as my queen, as the person that I really wanted to sleep with, that I was like enthralled by. And it didn't give me this weird perspective. Because if you think about it, like, if you have a partner who's gorgeous and beautiful, but then you go to porn and when she's not around, you just go, you're like, oh, my partner's not here, I'm just gonna, you know, flip on some porn, I'm gonna touch myself. You do that, and then you see this, and you're like, oh my God, that woman's so enthralling on porn. Like, she's making all these noises, and it's this thing. And then you're like, well, how come my girl doesn't make all those same noises, right? And then I'd be like, well, maybe I'm not good. Maybe she's not good. And then you get into this dance of like questioning it, you know? And for me, it would then lead to me going to strip clubs more. It would be me like going into that world more of being around that type of energy. And I would actually, you know, pull away from my partner. So cutting out the porn and, you know, committing to my partner being my model sexual partner. That became, you know, my main focus and really pulled me out of that unconscious.
So why did you stop porn? Was it that consciousness that like, you're like, oh, I'm aware that this is happening, so let me stop? Like, how did you choose? Because you, like, I imagine for you, like it was for me, is a low level addiction. Like, it was definitely something that was regular. For a lot of men, like, it's either like a high level or low level addiction to some regard. So how did you stop?
For me, honestly, it was an awareness. For me, I went, and I was with a partner that I really loved. Like, she was amazing. And she was really good looking. And at the same time, I would have so much comparison. And I remember being like, I'm like, why am I looking at these other women? Why am I looking at these other experiences when I have this beautiful, amazing human in front of me? And so I became aware of like withdrawing from her. And the more I did that, and I would be like, okay, well, there's something wrong here. And then I remember I was like, well, I'm just going to try not to watch porn for a couple weeks and see what happens. And I remember our sex was amazing. And I remember just being like, I wasn't like rubbing one out every 2 days. And like, I had a lot more, you know, testosterone and stored up inside of me. But then at the same time, I was so horny for her. I wanted her. I was just like, you know, enthralled in her. And so our sex was naturally so much better. And I remember after those 2 weeks, I was just like, I'm done. Never again am I watching porn. And to this day, I have not watched porn, even in a conscious way. Like, I just was like, nope, this stuff serves no purpose in my life whatsoever. I'm just going to dive so deep into my partners, and that will be my expression.
It's fucking beautiful.
How about you? How did you move out of the toxic masculinity and more into the conscious awareness of sacred sexuality?
It was it was whenever I was celibate in Bali. So I shared this before, that when I did that year of celibacy, that's where it came through. Because up until that point, like I was 21. So up until that point, I was in toxicity for sure. Predominantly, I would say, yeah, I was definitely in that space of not really caring for women in the way that I could have. Not really, like, it wasn't a practice. It wasn't sacred. It wasn't a lot of things that was possible to be, that I know now to be possible. But in that time of being celibate, that was the whole point of like exploring. And I went more into depth in this in, which one? I think it was
the episode where we talk about divine
femininity. Yeah, exactly. So I went more into depth in this, but basically took the year off of having sex, of engaging sexually. And that involved like kissing, that involved like anything, like a full celibacy. But I wanted intimacy. I wanted intimacy without the sexual contract, or like not even contract, but without needing that. And it allowed me to connect to women on so many levels. It allowed me to explore that place. It allowed me to see, there's so much here to explore. And when I actually took sex out of the picture, I could see the value of sex on such a deeper level. So I had to remove it from my options to be like, this is how much it matters. Look how beautiful it is. It's like, getting off the mountain, if you're always on the mountain, to see how beautiful it is. So you have to take a step off to witness the beauty in it. So with that, that's what I did. And luckily, coming out of that experience, I met somebody that was a tantrika, somebody who practiced Tantra in that world. And that was who I came out of celibacy with to explore that. So it was also a really beautiful way to kind of go back into sexual connection in a healthy way, in a way that was like, this is fun. We can kind of see what this is. And it was profound. And it took that, though. It took me making sure it wasn't an option. Like, no, you're not, like holding strong in that. I know you can relate to this, but just like making that declaration of like, I'm going to hold in this.
Yeah.
And me deciding that and not just being like washy with my energy and just going towards sex and whatever pleasure was around me. I'm like, no, I'm holding this down.
Yeah.
That then brought insights around, this is what intimacy can look like. This is what women actually want. Cause I got to talk to them and like actually get to know like women and connect. And like some of my best friends to this day I met in that celibacy. And it took that. It took that exploration of myself, because it brought up a lot for me too. I was so like built up, obviously, but then through that, I got to really see like what it could start to look like. And of course, it continued to be a journey after that, and stuff kept coming up. But that was like a first kind of big pillar in that exploration.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah,
I love that, and I love how at that age you approach celibacy. Like that's another level. Like when I think about me being 21, there was like that shit wasn't going down, man. Like I was deep in being straight up playboy.
Yeah.
So, hats off to you, man, for being so open so early on your journey. Like that's beautiful. And you highlighted something so epic here, which is when sex is the default, we default to it.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. It's like, and I even find myself still in this pattern sometimes, even though I'm much more explorative with my sexuality now. But when we're like, P and V, that's what we do. So what do? You make out for like 5-10 minutes, maybe. Some people might be like 30 seconds, rip the clothes off and just let's go.
Yeah.
Right? And then it's like, let's go until, one or both of us are done. Generally, I think it's till one of us are done. Man, I'm talking to you out there. Ladies, you know what I'm talking about. And I'm only saying that because I used to be that guy. And then that's it. That's sex.
Yeah.
And I think that, something like celibacy is such an important thing for individuals as well as couples to practice together, because it pushes you to learn to explore these other realms of connection and intimacy outside of just, taking your penis and putting it in a vagina or in a yoni, you know what I mean? And so it's very important to take a look at this.
Like, what would it look like that your partner, if you had sexual connection, you had intimacy without penetration?
Yeah.
Like, what's possible there? And then explore that, play with that. I know you've explored this a lot. I've also explored it.
Totally.
And it's like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Like, what can you do? What becomes possible? And this is kind of where the world of BDSM started coming in for me, and I think for you too.
For sure.
Was exploring this. I know it can be a heavy topic. Like BDSM it can be very intense in that world, and it can be very fun, explorative, and
beautiful.
opening and beautiful, and like it can be soft, but you know, it's like it can be
it's so funny. Every
lot
time
of
I
things.
hear BDSM and I bet other people are in the same boat, I just picture like some hardcore dominatrix in like all leather with a whip,
Yeah.
just like super intense with like chains and.
Which could be hot for sure.
Yeah, probably. Well,
Could be.
We'll get into your fantasies in a little bit here. You know what I'm saying? But you know, I think it's important to know that, and we're gonna get into this. We're gonna go into our experiences. Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful expression.
Yeah.
And regardless of what you want to label it, and the role that you know either take or that you ascribe to, it's important to know that this is just exploring sexual pleasure.
Yeah.
Right. And for me, that's really what this is about. It's like I suppressed pleasure for so many years. Mm-hmm. So many years. Because like you said, I never liked cunnilingus.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I'd be like, oh, I'm not eating a woman out. Like, no chance. And I did that because porn, because friends, like everyone was like, yo, she give you domes?
Yeah,
Did you get head?
That's what it was about.
You know, and then
yeah.
if I was like, no, I licked her vagina, they'd be like, yo, you're sick. You know, so it was this, and I keep saying vagina, yoni. Okay, I gotta get my terminology right here. Mm-hmm. But it was like, it would suppress so much pleasure. And then obviously exploring with partners once I became more conscious. And now I don't sleep with my partners at the beginning of a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For my last 3 relationships, it's been anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks of just connecting on another level. But through that experience, I started falling in love with cunnilingus.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I like this. Mm-hmm. But for so many years in this state of toxic masculinity, I would suppress and suppress and suppress, and then just shut myself off from this beautiful amount of pleasure that I receive.
Yeah. In them
and
receiving
that my partner
pleasure.
would receive.
That's
yes.
the thing. It's like, yeah, we would just go for like penis pleasure, basically. Like we just go to come. But seeing and feeling pleasure in your partner or whoever you're engaging with in this, that can be so much more fulfilling than ejaculation.
100%.
Like the pleasure in just giving pleasure alone.
Oh, for
and
sure.
allowing that to be the case. And it's
amazing.
like that. I've only recently, past couple of years, like started exploring that. Like they leaned into that. Yeah. And like, I don't need anything. Like I want to give. I want to give to you. Which is like, to go into the BDSM stuff, that's kind of where that started coming in. As I was like, and personally, I'll just share this. I had an interesting dynamic, let's say, with power, because the people around me, like my father figure was so powerful, but it didn't feel like it was in a healthy way. It felt like it was in a toxic way. And it was. And from my perspective and the women that were with him, I would hear as well. And so I was like, oh, I don't want to be identified as like powerful, even though I liked it, but I felt so wrong with that, especially when I went down the space of going to spirituality. I was like, I can't be powerful, or else that's wrong. I got to be soft. I got to be, got to be in that, which is like being your feminine, yes. But once I got to
the lion's coming out, baby.
I got to own my power in a way that's coming from love, that's coming from care, that's coming from safety. Mm-hmm. Like being powerful while also holding someone in that and allowing them to feel safe and supported. Mm-hmm. Oh, like tying somebody up, teasing them, playing with them, just pleasuring them for hours, right? Exploring that and allowing them to feel safe in that, but still owning my power in that, which is fucking healing for me.
So healing. For
that trauma around me, I can't be in my power, or else it's bad, or else it's wrong. This allows me to be in it while also checking in with the person, having conversations, open discussions, exploring that, and holding somebody in that. It's fucking beautiful.
And just to be clear, for those of you that are new, when he said tying somebody up, that's tying up somebody who has expressed that they like being tied up. Okay, we just want to add that in there. Is that he's not like, I just love tying. It's like tying somebody up that has expressed that they really enjoy bondage. They enjoy being tied up. Right? That I think for me is for anybody in that world, that needs to be.
You got to hear that.
Needs to be out there.
Yes.
And that's beautiful, man. And I love that so much, because I don't know about you, but for me, in some of my past relationships, it was really hard because, you know, I'm a powerful dude. I'm big. I'm strong, right? I'm not tooting my own horn here, people. I'm saying facts.
Yes,
like,
yes.
As a big, you know, big, strong dude, you know, I enjoy feeling that power. And a lot of women that I've been with in the past have like that power, and some of them haven't. And in the ones that haven't, a lot of times it would come up where this side of me, this primal, more aggressive, more kind of like animalistic side of me would get deemed as toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
And I remember, you know, it really affecting me in a few situations where I remember sitting and being like, wow, I've really done so much work on this. Like, how come I have this desire? How come I have this want to really be primal and be in my animal and allow for that to come through, obviously in a conscious, safe way. And I really was torn for a while because I took that on and I said, wow, I still have a lot of work to do. I really do. And I was like, how could this be? I feel like my sexual energy is so clean now. And it had me questioning a lot. And it wasn't until I started exploring these areas of more domination and submissiveness that it really started opening up to me that, wow, this is actually a part of my pleasure. This is a part of my expression. This is actually a part of my truth. And it's not like you go into this caveman, complete animalistic state. You're very tuned into your partner. You're very conscious. You're very aligned to them, asking them how they're doing, like really getting into a dance with them. And it's been so fucking healing to know that, because, you know, we're both about full expression.
Yeah.
And being able to express yourself fully sexually, I know we both share this, in a place like that is beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. And that's not to say that there wasn't aspects of this in my toxic masculinity where there was this desire to dominate the female species with numbers like we talked about. But at the same time, as you work on yourself and you really get to the root of what it is you want to do and how you want to express, it can be a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And actually, a good point there is to actually get to this place where we feel disconnected in it. I know we both relate on this. We had to really get close to our own divine femininity, as we talked about. I had to, like I said, open myself up to women in a way that was just friendly and loving and like let myself be seen.
Yeah.
I had to love on people like Cam, like big men around me that I would usually have up a wall against and just like deeply hug, be held by, and be seen in that. Have that softness to really be able to see and not just put myself in a box in a category of like, this is what I am, this is how I do it. Because again, like that cycle could show up again, even in this world, right? Like of what we did before. Sure. It's like, oh, I did this. And this is how sex looked. And then now it could be like, I do this. I just have more things to do it with now. And it could show up in a cycle. But the more we can have these discussions, the more we can talk about it, the more we can be open with the people around us. Like you and I have had so many discussions. Like, you know everything about my sex life. I know everything about yours completely. And we're like open to connect on this in such a loving way where even the partners are present. The people that we do it with are present. It's not that we're like, oh, I did this. Yeah. It's like, wow, you get to explore that. And it's this beautiful kind of way to be held in it and also be able to explore with the people we're able to explore this with, this open conversation and dialogue around it. Like what would actually give you pleasure? And of course, for women, that changes on their cycle, on their moon, on what's happening. Becoming aware of that's also very important with this practice. It's because it's not going to be the same. Like men, we have some consistency with our desire, a bit more tends to be. And then depending on the cycle of the woman, it's like
sometimes
you got to show up for that.
Sometimes it's really it's more intense.
It's like fucking beautiful to be able to be with that symphony in that way that it moves. And so I guess I'm mentioning this because of the clarity on, yes, there's the intensity. Yes, there's bringing forward kind of the power that we're able to embody at this point. But I feel it's this way of exploring only because the softness and the femininity is real inside of me and inside of you to be seen in that.
Oh man, I love that you brought that up. And I resonate so deeply with that. And I love how you said bring these things up. Like we bring these things to the surface, Like I think that one thing a lot of ding, a lot of people hide their sexuality.
Yeah.
I sure as hell know I did for so long. Outside of being like, yeah, you know, dude,
but like your kinks and your actual real weird shit you want to do.
Like
I would hold back on that.
We actually, I think, hold back on ourselves in a sense. Like I know me personally, like we're gonna get into butt stuff. Me personally, I have massive blocks around my anus.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because there was this stigma growing up of homosexuality. There was this stigma of, you know, if you touch your butt, you're gay.
Yeah.
And so there's so much tension and trauma stored in there that for me personally, I've completely shut myself off to this absolute pleasure portal. Like, I don't know, I can't remember what it is, but I think they say, I haven't fact checked this, so it might be complete bullshit. But they say that men have, you know, 6 G-spots or 5 G-spots inside of the rectum or the anus.
I know our true G-spot, that's where it lies.
Yeah,
it's there.
I don't know how true that is. So somebody, if you're listening, please call me out.
How many G-spots are in there?
How many G-spots are in the man's anus?
Yeah.
But, you know, I know that I've shut myself off from pleasure in that way.
Yeah.
And I did that because I didn't have anybody I could talk to about it. And it wasn't until a good friend of mine was dating a tantrika, and he started playing with butt plugs, and he started telling me like, Cam, like, you know, I use an obsidian butt plug.
Fuck yeah.
And it's amazing. And I remember he showed me, and I'm like, bro, you put that where?
Yeah.
That's next level. But it opened me up because, you know, he was a rugby player, he was a strength and conditioning coach, he was like this big strong man. And, you know, he was into that stuff. And it just totally opened me up to being like, whoa, okay. And that wasn't too long ago. You know, that would have been probably, you know, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to know, like, we got to talk about our pleasures. We got to share these experiences.
It is.
And really bring these things to light, because there's so much to explore in sexuality, and we're so basic with penetration that we just default to that. And
I know there's so many different ways to access pleasure and to gain different ways of connecting and experiencing all different just sensations on our body, on our being, like that we hold back from. And to the butt stuff, yeah, this is something that I know you and I are constantly.
We were talking the other day about, do we wax our buttholes?
I know, we're talking about getting our butts waxed. Like, we might wax our buttholes here soon, because
we can't bring you live to that, but we will definitely share.
We'll share
the
when it's done.
After.
We'll let you know, because there's some dangers in having hairy buttholes whenever it comes to butt plugs and things like that. So that's why. But yeah, it's this idea and this concept behind, like, certain areas meaning certain things. Like BDSM meaning X, doing butt stuff means X. Like, it's just like, boom, this means that, so don't do that.
Yeah.
But it's this fluid experience.
Yeah.
Ever changing as well. Like, beautiful in the ways of exploring, in the ways of engaging with what it means to be intimate, what it means to be sexual, what it means to have connections with love, what it means to really feel somebody and be embodied with another person inside of that, and to merge with somebody. Oh, like the energetic bodies, we can speak on that, but it's fucking beautiful. And I think only once starting to explore these worlds, it's really become apparent, like, how much is possible. And like I said, we're not experts. We're still constantly exploring. We're just explorers. We're just like, you know, exploring these new worlds, these woods, these jungles, and seeing what happens and what occurs. And it's fucking fun.
We'll have an episode on Ryan and Cam explore the butt plug.
Yeah, well, that'll be soon.
It's
actually really.
I'm nervous, man.
I know. I got mine. It's in the States.
Okay.
I found one. Somebody get it.
Crystal?
Yeah, it's obsidian, because I remember you said that, so I was like, I'll do obsidian.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
So I'm curious, Ryan. When you say you mentioned some pretty cool topics there, like you mentioned like real connection, energetic connection. It sounds like you're getting more into that tantric space.
Yeah.
With that tantrika, did she open you up to any, like, well, I'm sure she opened you up to a bunch of stuff, but was it her that kind of really helped you start to learn these aspects of connection, outside of penetration? Like, tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. So for the last 2 months in my celibacy, I was with that person.
Okay.
And, like, we weren't in any way, like, we wouldn't say we were in a partnership, but we were exploring things together. And it was like, I'm going to hold off though. Like, I'm doing the celibacy. I'm at 10 months. I'm going to do a year. So she's like, okay, fine. I know many ways we can explore without going against the celibacy. I was like, great, open me up. Let's go. I'm ready for it. And so, yes, in that, cunnilingus came in. These other pieces started coming in where I'm like, okay, at first I said, okay, I wasn't going to do this, this, and this, but let's see if I can put these pieces in as long as I'm sticking to what I said and I was determined to do, which was create intimate space, intimate connection without having intercourse, without kind of penetration being part of it. So all of these different things, different sensations, different, like I was saying, like we would have ice and then we would have like different pieces that would come into it that would be involved in this experience that was going so far beyond. Like we would sit, and so there's this beautiful practice where we're just ninjaing a bug. This beautiful practice where you just sit or stand and you witness the other person naked and you just witness them. But it's, if you ever done eye gazing, you would know the power in eye gazing. When I do it, I hallucinate. After like 2 minutes, I start hallucinating. It's very intense for me. But in that, then the body, where you experience the body, you experience the other person in their nudity, and you experience the beauty in that being, and then you can go into an eye gaze. And for me, that was one of the most electrifying experiences in my life. Just being fully, like, I don't think I ever was fully witnessed in my nude self until that point. I never let myself be fully seen, right? I liked being naked. Sure, it's cool in the locker room.
Which is now, though.
Exactly. But even before, like, I was kind of open to it. I was open to skinny dipping and things, but in a playful way where it was like I wasn't being seen.
You're not standing there as
No,
naked.
I'm just standing and like
looks at you.
Looks at me.
Yeah.
Just standing there as I am. I'm not getting erect. I'm not doing anything. I'm just being seen. And that was beautiful. Like, it brought me to tears. And it was orgasmic at the same time. I was like, whoa, this is so incredible. And that was that was my first experience of like energy moving in a sexual way, but that was just so pure.
Without even
and it's touching. Like, we didn't touch, we didn't do anything. Like, we didn't start like grabbing each other after that. We just had this softness. And then we sat and we closed our eyes into meditation, and like I blasted off. But that was an experience of getting introduced into the tantric world where I was like, what is this? Like, what's possible here if we can just stand in our nude selves, witness each other, and I can have this whole orgasmic full body experience and blast off? What's possible?
Yeah.
So there was lots of exploration, lots of things that I just got introduced to, and I was very interested in exploring and continue to this day to explore because it's beautiful, man.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. I love that so much. That space is so important, and I think it's so overlooked. Like, if you think about sexual education, where they say, put the condom on the banana, you know, it's like that's what sex ed is for us in school. And it's like you see a baby being born, and you talk about STDs and how to strap up, and that's it. Not a strap on, but they should get into that stuff. But I think that's so beautiful, like to just be seen and accepted in your nakedness is so powerful, and we don't do that. Like, so many people are like, I gotta turn off the lights and then let's just go. And it's like
my thing as well.
Totally, it's like shut off the lights and let's just feel everything, and that can be fun if you're blindfolded. You know, you can get into some stuff, but
to do all these things, it could be fun. Even like you're talking about before, the primal sex of just ripping clothes off and having sex. If you agree upon that, and you're like, I want that today. Today actually is what I want. I want you just
and your partner's like, hell yeah, I want that.
Then
it's like, giddy up,
fucking do that. And with the lights off, do that. But have exploration in these other areas and allow yourself to be seen in these other areas as well.
You brought up such a cool topic around eye gazing, and I had this. I got a download. Okay. All right, came through. It's wild to me that as humans, like, how many people out there have eye gaze with their partners, and we fuck, and we don't even eye gaze. Like, we literally take our like body and put it inside another person's body and juices, and we don't even take time to stare into each other's eyes. We don't even take time to inhale each other's breath. Like, there's so many other things that we totally just like throw away because we go right to sex. You know, and I think, like, we say this over and over again, like celibacy, you know, semen retention, all these things are so important. Because for me, when I started dating and I was like, no, I'm not having sex until like I really know there's a connection, you spend time figuring out if there's a connection.
Yeah.
But if you just go right to sex, you're like, we got connection, shit's dope,
Yeah.
like, you know, you didn't fist bump me there, but whatever.
We didn't have sex, so I didn't.
Well, we didn't, but you know, anyways, not yet. But it's like we don't take the time to explore those things, and in those moments, like with you being witnessed in your nakedness, I've had so many beautiful experiences just eye gazing, just meditating in, I don't know what that position's called in Tantra, where it's like you're like sitting over each other like this.
Oh, I just call it spider.
Spider? Okay. Yeah. Where like, the usually it's for me, it's my legs are below and then she's kind of straddling me.
Yeah, you're just close. You're like heart to heart.
Heart to
like
heart,
with
really
each other.
close. Like
your sexual organs are very close.
Very close, but no penetration.
Exactly.
And just sitting in that, sometimes with clothes on, sometimes naked, but just, you know, feeling each other.
Being with each other, holding each other.
For you know, sometimes 30, 40, 50 minutes, right? And you just breathe and you feel. And there's this other level.
Yeah, you merge. This is what I was talking about earlier. You literally start to merge.
You merge as one. And that's when I started doing that and then would enter intercourse after. It's like you're one person.
And that's where the pleasure for the other becomes this pleasure for yourself. Because you're like, if she's coming, I'm coming. Like if I'm with that, like there's no separation of like, we're in this together. It's this journey we get to be on.
Like I have been bawling my eyes out, like crying with my partner, crying because the pleasure is so insane. Like, why don't we talk about this more? Yeah. Why isn't this something that, you know, that's more conventional? Because I can't express enough of how beautiful that experience is, and all it takes is feeling. Building an energetic connection, building a spiritual connection.
Yes.
Like,
And even the first layer before that I think is important to talk about, which I would love for you to speak to, around the topic of the curiosity in the first place, which we kind of talked about as like ISTA questions. Yeah. Starting to ask your partner like the true desires and starting to like understand your true desires. Because for a long time, I didn't even know what I really wanted because I was like, what the fuck do I even want here? Yeah. And so starting to have that dialogue, open conversation, starting to connect on that to go deeper into the physical representations of it, but started by verbalizing it.
For sure. Well, it's funny. Like I don't even know what the ISTA acronym stands for. Like I actually don't. And I didn't know about ISTA until I got to Costa Rica. Like this is something that's really recent for me. However, I'm very interested in diving deeper. I just honestly haven't had the time because we've been rolling so much. But when it comes to those types of experiences, it's all about communication and consent.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so I don't know much about it, but what I do know is that communication and consent is at the forefront of it all. Mm-hmm. And it's about when you meet somebody, you sit down and you ask questions and you talk and you ask, what are your desires? What are your fears? What are your expectations? When's the last time you were tested? You go through these various questions and it gives you a clear understanding of where that person's at in such a cool way. And in that moment, you can be like, wow, that actually doesn't feel good for me. Yeah. So are you okay if we don't do that?
That's a big piece.
And then they're like, oh, no, I actually really need this. And you're like, beautiful. This isn't aligned.
Yeah.
Moving on. We can be friends. Maybe there's something else for us to explore. Right. And so for me, I think and it doesn't have to be those questions. Right. And I think there's 5 or 6.
But it's along those lines.
But it's along the lines of just getting to a place where you're having an open conversation about what that person wants. And not only is it going to give you a lot of information, but it's a great shit test to ask somebody to see if they've done the work to actually know what they want.
Yeah. And for permission is a big deal because a lot of people will just do it like, oh, this person wants that, so fine, I'll do it.
For sure.
Okay, I'm supposed to do it.
Yeah.
But really getting, you're saying, consent and permission and being open to a place where you can say no.
Yeah.
Being open in a space where you can have open dialogue about that, not have somebody that's going to be offended for you saying no, holding your ground and owning what you're in.
And I know that ISTA is very, very much about learning to take rejection.
Yeah.
Like that's
They
a
hold that
huge
down.
part of it
Yeah.
is you have to be able to say, I want this, and the person's like, no, and then you're like, okay, or they want it, and you have to be able to say no and be okay with that and not make it mean anything.
Yeah.
I think is the most important part of that. And, you know, consent for me it's always been a big thing. Like, I think I've always been very good with this personally. As, like, you know, being very vulnerable right now, like, I can't get it up if there's not intimacy. Like, if there's not like that connection, that passion, my dick don't work.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a great default for me. It's just been like, all right, well, there's nothing here. So there we go. So for me, consent's always been like a big part of it. However, never as explicit as it is now, because it can, like you said, you can be like, hey, I'm feeling primal today. I just want to rip off your clothes and ravage you. And she has, or he has the total openness or freedom to be like, no, I don't feel that today. And me be like, okay, that's cool. But also to be like, yes, and then be like, here we go.
Fuck yeah. And that's a big deal. You brought up a good point. It's especially when exploring with a partner, consent is not a one-time thing. Like, okay, you wrote it off. Yes. You said you're down for butt stuff. Great. Now forever you're down for butt stuff. No. No. This is something you engage with daily, often. Check in on these things, on these spaces. And the more you get to know the person, the more you kind of get to have these,
feel and dance with them.
And as you're doing it, it's not awkward when you're in the act, because you get to, as you're exploring the sexual engagement itself, you get to talk about these things. I think it's fucking beautiful. I personally, at this point, love verbalizing while having sex. Love having dialogue about things. Like, love kind of exploring and seeing if this is wanted, and does this turn you on, and does this.
Yeah.
So if that does it for you, that's the move. But if it's something where that doesn't work for you, make sure you engage and talk about it beforehand, because it's something that changes on a regular basis.
Totally. And, you know, it's funny. Not funny, actually, at all, now that I say that. But it came up this morning in conversation with what's going on in the U.S. right now. And one thing that I want to say is like ask for permission to like come inside of people. You know what I mean? Like, I don't like, we're talking about consent. So this really came up for me. Yes. And this morning I was talking with my partner about it, and a lot of guys don't ask.
Coming anywhere.
About, well, exactly.
Well, yes, I mean, this was a conversation
this
as well.
The other day as well, and we were talking about coming on your face, on your chest, on your back, whatever. It's like, I don't fucking know what's going on, but from what I've heard from a lot of women in my life lately is that men don't ask if they can come inside on or around women, and it's like that's a very important thing, especially when it comes to pregnancy and like Plan B and all this shit. It's like that is such an important layer of consent that I think gets overlooked so often. It's like, if you don't want to ask for consent to come, strap on a Jimmy cap, like wear a condom. You know what I mean? But if you're going in and you're experiencing sex without protection, don't just shoot the gun off in the house.
No.
Like, you gotta warn people. You know, and I'm really passionate about that today, because on this topic of consent, it's like, I just heard this keeps coming up, and I was kind of shocked. I was like, is this actually a thing? Like,
that's a permission thing. That's not even like warning. No, when it comes to that,
it's like before we have sex, can I come inside of you? Like, that is a very important.
Seems so obvious, but I'm glad you're naming that. It seems like a very obvious thing, but it isn't. Right? Yeah, that's true. Yeah, even our friend just the other day, we had a woman we were just talking to her about it on ejaculation. She's like, yeah, I hate when guys just come on my face. Like, what the fuck?
You're like,
who's just coming on your face? And like, this is something that we're having. So like, I just want to come this place, so I'll do it. Wherever, I'm just going to come where I want to come. No,
right? No, that's not okay.
You don't do that.
No, and I think it comes back to porn. You know, I think it comes back to these experiences, and even with your partner, you got to ask this stuff. Like, there's stats on all kinds of sexual trauma coming from relationships, right? Where there's not this communication. There's
could be even more with relationships, because they're like, I'm supposed to, because I'm the partner.
Totally. You're my partner. I want to fuck. We're fucking.
I'm supposed to do it this way, and then like, okay, yes, you're right. We're together, so I need to do this.
Yeah,
that's a lot of trauma can come from that space for sure.
And this, we're harping on the gents a bit right now, but this doesn't just fall on men. It falls on both. You have to. Not you. I'm going to talk from my perspective. I have to have open communication with my partner all the time about what's expected. Because don't get me wrong, I've gotten into situations with partners in the past where we were like, ooh, this doesn't feel right. And then it's kind of like this awkward space where I wanted it one way, she wanted it another way. It didn't happen. And so there was this kind of like, you're not seeing me kind of energy.
Yeah.
You have to have these constant conversations with your partners around, how are you feeling today? All right. And sometimes, yes, there's passion and you can read it. But even at the same time, it's like, during, like you're saying, you love talking during. It's like, are you enjoying this? Is this what you want? What do you want me to do next? How do you want to navigate this? What would excite you? You know, it's not like once you enter a person, you become a mute.
Well, that's actually
you know?
So if I'm being honest, this happened not too long ago where I was having sex with somebody that I was exploring a connection with, and we started having sex. We were communicating throughout the way, and we're like, yeah, this is beautiful, love this, checked in, all good. Throughout, I was like, how's your experience? Like, you turned on by this? And she was like, actually, I'm feeling like I'm thinking about a lot of things right now, and I'm just like, my mind's going everywhere. And I'm like, okay, let's take a break. We paused, like we sat with each other,
beautiful,
meditated for a minute, and she was like, oh, this is actually, it's so hot that you're actually giving me space right now. I'm fucking turned on now. And then you got back in it, because it's like, of course, for whatever shows up. Yes, it can be challenging because we're so charged up, but give it space. It's always worth it.
Totally.
It's always worth it.
It always is.
You have to override that animal sometimes, whenever that comes up, because it's going to serve, it's going to support, it's going to heal. And most likely, it's probably going to turn that other person on more, that you gave them space, you gave them security, you gave them a place to be held.
100%.
Like, and it's fucking beautiful. So yeah, that's
it is. And you're working against an animalistic wiring, right? Like, here's
why celibacy worked out so well.
That's why celibacy and
great
semen
training
retention and stuff is so important. Is that, like, who said you can't stop in the middle of sex?
Yeah.
Like, who says that you can't take a break? You know, there was this Tantra teacher that I connected with in Bali. Not sexually, just connected with at a workshop. And he would say that if he got to a place where he felt like he was going to ejaculate and his partner wasn't there yet, he would remove himself from the situation and he'd go do a headstand for like 4 minutes. And he said it was like reset him and take him back out of, like, feeling this pressure in his penis. Right. And he would go into this state, and then he would go back in. And if he got to a place where he was going to come again before she had come, he'd go do another headstand. And so he got into this habit. And I started applying, I don't do headstands, but I started applying that where it's like, oh, if you feel like you're getting to that place and your partner hasn't come yet, it's like, remove yourself, pleasure her.
Maybe it's time for cunnilingus.
Maybe it's time for
suck
cunnilingus,
a toe,
right?
Do something different. Yeah.
Eat some chocolate, whatever.
Yeah, ooh. Right? Chocolate. We didn't even talk about food during sex. That'll be a whole other
episode.
Okay, yep.
But, I think it's really important to acknowledge, like, you for that, and to be like, hey, let's take a break.
Yeah.
And that's what I think the foundation of all of this is there's so much love, so much communication. And when you have a sacred connection with somebody, there is no right or wrong. Like, you can be like, hey, wait, this isn't for me anymore. Can we stop?
Yeah.
And it's like, cool. Yeah, 100%. I honor you.
And that's what happens when you open that permission beforehand. Mm-hmm. You feel on both sides that you have permission. You're like, oh, this is allowed. I'm allowed to communicate whatever I want, whenever I want, because I'm owning my experience. Yeah. And that is allowed because of how you've engaged it from the beginning, before you engage in the act, without just going into it. There's conversation, there's communication. It's fucking beautiful. Yeah.
I love that. So people, most important thing here, communication, and step into the discomfort of having this conversation.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing, is like, it's still, for me, is sticky. It's like when you meet somebody, it's like, hey, let's sit down and have a discussion on what we want. What are your desires? What are your fears? What's your attachment style? How do you like to be pleasured?
Yeah. What are your love languages? What are your kinks?
What are your kinks? Like, all this stuff, and start to dive into this. Even if you've been with your partner for 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, like, go in, they change, they evolve, it shifts. And open up those lines of communication, because we're, like we said, we're not experts. I'm still learning this stuff so often. Like, it's a journey for sure. And at the same time, this has opened up a whole new world for me in the realm of pleasure and connection and excitement and playfulness and exploration.
Yes. Continue to play with it. Continue to lean into it. As always, ask questions, share insights, bring us in. This is a community platform. We're trying to bring people into these experiences, sharing our experiences, opening this world up that's usually controversial. We're bringing it forward. We're being real.
That's it.
That's it. Stay lit.
Sick, bro.